be, your performance being affected because of ill health. But that also has to come out to keep up with the latest research, because we're finding, as you suggested, presenteeism isn't inherently bad.
95% of webinar participants, again, employees from across the world, say yes. I wanted to ask for help and I didn't. And then the follow-up question is like, why didn't you ask for help? Because I didn't want to be seen as incompetent, because I didn't want to be seen as weak, because I didn't want to be seen as a non-team player.
Be proactive. Check in on people. How are you? How are you doing? And create a culture where people feel comfortable to share health issues and experiences.
Hello, my name is César, and I'm the founder and managing director of Dharma Center for Wellbeing, and I would like to welcome you to Re-Engaged at Work, a podcast designed with you in mind to help you improve engagement, retention, and performance through workplace well-being. Now, before we begin the episode today, make sure to click the subscribe button below so you can be the first to benefit from the wisdom, knowledge, and experience of our distinguished guests. And speaking of distinguished guests, we are honored to have business psychologist extraordinaire, Dr. Zara Whysall, on today's episode. Zara, please say hello to everyone before I properly introduce you.
Hi everyone.
So Zara is an associate professor of business psychology who straddles academia and industry. She is a chartered psychologist and associate fellow of the British Psychological Society with over 20 years experience in applied research, consultancy, and training across public and private sector organizations. Alongside her academic role, she is Research and Impact Director at Kitty Partners Business Psychologists, now part of Gately. Zara focused her PhD research on workplace health and safety interventions, and she has published peer-reviewed journals, professional journals, and book chapters in the European Journal of Work and Organizational Psychology, Journal of Health Psychology, and Management Decisions and Ergonomics. Goodness me, Zara, you are a busy lady.
Yes.
Welcome to our episode on presenteeism, my dear Zara. So, Zara, as you know, we met just recently, and I attended a session of yours on presenteeism at an employee or a workplace well-being event in Birmingham, and I was just blown away. I was blown away for a number of reasons. Reason number one is that obviously presenteeism is a term that is still making its way into business circles, into HR. We kind of know what it is, but the problem is that, as you will explain in a moment, that our lack of understanding of the full-blown, concept of presenteeism is being the media is contributing to our understanding of presenteeism. And I think the media is not doing a really good job at it, right? Because they do a lot of scaremongering, as you know, and there's most media is sensationalist, and it's really kind of distorting our understanding of presenteeism. So, and I'm a victim of that as well. I had my own view of it, and then after I heard your talk, I realized that my view was limited, compared to all the research that you've done on the topic. So I would love to invite you on this journey of, first of all, defining what presenteeism is, and then really understanding the light side and the dark side of it, because some people might not realize that there's a light side to presenteeism, right? And there are legal obligations and legal requirements of employers that they need to basically observe as well. And then I would like for you to also help us understand on the personal front, how to make a healthy decision as to how to deal with. I mean, if we are feeling that we're not fit to work, what should we do about it? What are the options that we have? What's kind of the process, the internal process that we go through in order to make the right choice for ourselves? So I love that journey that you took me on, a couple months ago, and I would love, for you to share that journey with our listeners and viewers as well. So excited for today's episode. So let's start with defining it first.
Yeah.
So let's arrive at a universal and unified kind of definition. So how would you define presenteeism then, Sarah?
Yeah, well, it has changed over the years. So I think it's understandable for people to not be completely up to speed with the latest definition. I think practitioners were first to look into this phenomenon. Academics still had to catch up, and so I think we're still doing that. We're still catching up. There's still a lot to be learned. And in the time as well, of course, work has changed massively, so the definitions had to change with it. For instance, the most common or simple definition used to be going to work when unwell or something along those lines. But of course, for many of us now, going to work is a little bit misleading, right? Because we're just here. I've just moved from my kitchen to my, this room. And so going to work, I think, needs to come out. But essentially, it's working whilst unwell. So that's the first thing. The second change in the definition, I would say, is that some of the early definitions had wrapped up in them a judgment about performance in that as well. So it might be, your performance being affected because of ill health. But that also has to come out to keep up with the latest research, because we're finding, as you suggested, presenteeism isn't inherently bad. So the definition should simply be about the behaviour, the act of working whilst you're unwell. Set aside any judgments about whether that's good or indifferent. So hopefully that helps in terms of the definition.
Yeah, I love that you've gone from the kitchen to your living room, and yeah, you're at work now.
Yeah.
Now, let's understand then the difference between presenteeism and absenteeism as well. Just to kind of clarify those two concepts. I mean, they're kind of related. There's an interplay between the two of them. So can you just elaborate on that for us, please?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, every HR practitioner hopefully has got sickness management measured and managed. So sickness absence, of course, is when we take official leave from work when we're unwell or due to ill health. So they are essentially two parts of the same, or two sides of the same coin, and they should definitely be managed together. Because research shows that they're correlated. It's not the case that one might substitute the other. So if you reduce sickness presenteeism, then the other one goes up. We tend to do both together. So when we're managing an ill health episode, you tend to have a combination of the two things together, happening together. So you must manage the two things together. The trouble is, if we think that we've got this nice distinct barrier between sickness presenteeism here and sickness absence here, when you think about it, and I'm sure for many practitioners who manage it, you know that actually there's quite a lot of fuzziness now in the middle, especially with hybrid working. For instance, I wonder now, when we're working from our living room, having just lived from our kitchen, is I'm actually not feeling very well. Am I more likely or less likely to actually formally report sickness absence to my manager now? Or would I, just go and sit on the sofa for half a day? I don't know. I think that's needs to be researched. So there's a fuzziness now, I think, between the two categories, exacerbated by the fact that we now work from home and remotely more often. Also, we found in our research that even when people have reported that they are taking sickness absence, so formally they have requested a day of sickness absence or informed their line manager, actually then they're doing some work anyway. I've logged on to do my emails, or I'm just finishing a report because the deadline's looming. So actually that presenteeism, I'm working while I'm unwell, yet also I've declared myself off sick formally. So I think we have a bit of a mess at the moment with these categories, but strictly speaking, sickness absence is that formal taking sign off due to ill health, whereas presenteeism is when you continue to work.
Which is more prevalent nowadays, presenteeism or absenteeism, you'd say?
Presenteeism, by far. You get different ratios in the research, anything from 6 times more upwards and more prevalent. So, I mean, some people in the research I've done have says that they experience sickness presenteeism every single working day of their life because they've got a chronic condition. So it's affecting them on every single working day. A typical sickness absence rates are 6 days, is it on average currently, or something like that in the UK? Presenteeism you would expect much more. I mean, in some of the studies I've done, you're looking at maybe on average sort of 20 days more like. So much more common.
Now, in a moment, I do want to address the whole media influence on our understanding of presenteeism. But first, let's actually go there. No. Before we go to the media element, sickness absence, fairly straightforward to kind of report and understand and kind of manage data around. Presenteeism, how do we measure it?
Much harder. Actually, in terms of its prevalence, whilst it's much more prevalent, it's not necessarily a bad thing. We'll come back to that. But it's not that you would want to minimise or eradicate presenteeism. So let's come back to that. But yeah, how do you measure it? There are various academic tools that practitioners do use. We just had a couple of questions that you could use. But it means basically you have to ask people, to ask every person, have you in the last however long worked whilst experiencing ill health? So it's along those lines. I mean, I suppose no harder than sickness absence. It also relies on individuals to be reported to you, right? But yeah, it's a matter of asking people, how are you today? I mean, if every manager asked their employees, how are you today? Are you experiencing any ill health? Then they would know there's some sickness presenteeism going on here because they're right in front of me doing their job, yet they're experiencing ill health. So yeah, it's a big issue.
So lately I've seen loads of businesses offering systems and applications that would help businesses kind of conduct check-ins with their employees, right? And there's systems that as soon as you log on to your work computer, it asks you, how are you? How are you feeling? The thing is that these systems have been around now for a few years, and people are getting fed up of having to actually report every single day how they're feeling, right? And sometimes they've asked, please, can we just do this check-in like every week or every like 2 weeks, but because it's actually impacting my mental health. You asking me how I'm feeling every day, right?
Yeah.
But I mean, it's a personal thing. So if it were up to you, in order to get proper measurements, because I do want business leaders listening to us to at least have some kind of advice in terms of how often should I be actually asking these questions? Should I be asking them weekly, monthly, quarterly, in order for me to get valid data that I can actually work on? What would your recommendation be, Zara?
Oh, that's such a good question. Because I completely get with you in the annoyance of things that pop in my day. It's like getting to visit a website and do you accept the cookies? Yes, just let me onto the website. So I think it's a balance between not burdening people with questions when they just want to get on with things versus not leaving it too long so that if somebody has not a health issue that should be proactively managed, then it's allowed to drag on until it gets more and more severe. So it's a balance. I'd say also it's about knowing your people and then taking a personalized approach. If you have somebody who has a known and told you about a chronic health issue, then check in with them perhaps more regularly. Somebody is, as far as you can see, fit and healthy, then perhaps they don't need to be asked every day, but certainly periodically check in with them. And whether that's I would hope that my managers are checking in with their people every week anyway, just generally, how are you? So why not ask about that every week? But I think if you think about the conditions that affect people most commonly at work, it's mental health conditions, it's musculoskeletal health, the things that you see in the press associated with presenteeism, hospitals, etc. Well, there's not very much we can do about those. They come and they go, so we don't need to be finding out if somebody has a cold, right? So I think we need to use a little bit of common sense as well. But I'd say a periodic check-in is key, not necessarily every day, maybe weekly, maybe bi-weekly, something along those lines. Basically, don't mean it so long that if there is an issue, by the time you have discovered it, it's much worse than it could have been in the first place. It could have been your opportunity to make some adaptations to the job to make sure that we're not making it worse as employers. So something along those lines. What do you think? Is it defensive enough?
I mean, I like how you provided your answer, Zara, and I think the key words are periodically, and we need to systematize as well.
Mm.
We cannot just perhaps rely on self-reporting. We cannot just rely on managers asking every now and again. Like in my consultancy, we help businesses set up mental health and safety management systems in order to identify hazards of a psychosocial nature. And sometimes and it's a system that forces you to every quarter, we actually launch a survey with very specific questions that helps us identify these hazards of a psychosocial nature. And some business leaders say to me, yeah, but I've got people in my business that actually are quite sensitive, and they're quite savvy, and they're able to detect these things. And I say to them, that's absolutely fine, but what if they go on holiday, and what if they just take their eye off the ball for a couple of months? You need to systematize it. And in
Yes.
addition to the systematization of fishing for this these psychosocial hazards, you can add a layer of those people that are quite that have a good eye, can spot these kind of situations, and then report them as well. But that's an additional layer.
Mm.
So I guess the answer would be you have to do it periodically, at least. So in this particular case, in case of presenteeism, weekly, monthly, something quite short, but something that just captures this particular element. Mental health and safety management systems actually deal with dozens and dozens of psychosocial hazards, so that's a different story. But in the case of presenteeism, I would say or weekly or monthly, just a quick kind of check-in, but
Yes.
systematize it.
Completely agree. We can't leave it to chance. We can't accept that people will tell us, because I know I've seen time and time again in research, although the press would make us think that everybody are kind of, sick people who don't really work very hard. The research shows actually the majority of people are good, and they're trying to do a good job, and they will forget. They will just get on with their jobs and forget to raise things. It's just human nature, isn't it? So I absolutely agree with systematizing this is key.
Yeah, and then of course, you need to create as a leader a culture of psychological safety in your team, so that they can feel free to say. So, for instance, I got an email from my chief of staff this morning saying, I've got a bad toothache, and I'm going to go and see a doctor. So I'm going to be in and out of of work. So she's letting me know that she is not fit to work today. And that she's letting me know also that she'll be dipping in and out of work because there's some stuff. But that's a choice.
Yes.
That's a personal choice of hers, right? And I always say, listen, if you have to kind of completely disconnect, just do that. But if you feel like you want to check in or whatever, then that's absolutely fine as well. But don't feel compelled to, right? But at least they're coming forward and saying it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's what's really important, right? Now, okay, let's go to the media, and then we'll come back to the light side of presenteeism as well. So how is the media contributing to distorting our understanding of presenteeism? And because I think they're making more bad than good in terms of our
I would agree. I'd agree. I mean, they need a story, right? It needs to be exciting. The image I think you see usually in the press association presenteeism is somebody with a tissue, right, blowing their nose. It's a cough and a cold, and that sort of thing. And yes, that is the type of health issue that most of us will experience. However, it's not the biggest cause of presenteeism in terms of number of days. So it's a little bit misleading in terms of the health issue that's at the root cause. Also, it's not the health issue that we need to manage. As I've said, a cold will come and go, and often you can get on with your job relatively unimpeded by a cold. It doesn't need to be managed. It's the other conditions, the less visible conditions, that are the biggest issues and that do need to be managed before they have huge impact on either the individual or productivity for the organisation. So that's the first thing. The second thing, of course, is the fact that presenteeism is presented as something that is bad and must be eradicated. And I think almost also a sense of workers are lazy and trying to pull a fast one on their employers with this presenteeism. So you've kind of alluded to this already. It's the light side of presenteeism that isn't presented in the press. So I think we've both got backgrounds in occupational health contexts, and people from those contexts know that it is the reality of human nature that people will experience ill health. Very few of us are lucky enough to be perfectly healthy, right? So as managers and employers, we are dying to have people at work with illness. Okay, so we can't realistically be trying to eradicate presenteeism. Also, it's a positive part of occupational rehabilitation and occupational health management that we try to identify people who have got perhaps low-level health issues before it gets worse, and let's do something about it in the workplace before they go off sick. So that means we're trying to find people with presenteeism before it becomes sickness absenteeism. And also on the reverse side, when somebody has been off with a severe health issue, we bring them back through a phased return to work, don't we? This is evidence-based practice. So that means we want to get them back. We want them to be experiencing a health issue, but we want to manage their work and make sure it's adapted in a suitable way, that the work is not making them more unhealthy, right? Not aggravating a health issue, but also hopefully being a positive part of the rehabilitation. Giving them structure. I think particularly your mental health issues, right? Giving them some structure. You've got that social support of your old team back. You've got some purpose, hopefully, and some meaning. Of course, all of those things are dependent on good work and good management. So, I mean, that's a whole other discussion, isn't it? But absolutely, presenteeism isn't something that's inherently bad. It's not managed when people are simply down to work and we don't know that they're ill, or they're hiding the fact that they're ill. So that's another important issue. And that it's bad. That's not great, and we need to do something about that. But on the other side, there's some benefits.
Yeah, and we'll come to the benefits in a moment, right? And as I was listening to you, Zara, it's like, I mean, sometimes employers ignore that they have a duty of care toward their employees, and that the current regulation basically stipulates that employers need to make reasonable adjustments to ensure that employees that are experiencing physical, or mental, conditions are not are not put at a disadvantage when it comes to their work, right? And unfortunately, not many employers are actually aware of that very, very basic and very fundamental legal duty of care requirement. And they can get into really big trouble, financially, legally, and reputationally as well, for not making those reasonable adjustments, right? So, all right, let's move on then to the various types of presenteeism that I saw you present on that day. If I remember correctly, in a moment, I'll basically, actually, let me show the slide now. Because I really like that slide that you shared.
So I'll start introducing it if you like while you're doing that. So this, I think what you're about to show is a framework created by two friends and colleagues of mine, so Maria and Karolinka Murray, who used to be at NCU, she's now at the University of Loughborough, and Caroline Biron, who is an academic based in Canada. And so the two of them came up with this fantastic framework. And I told them that you thought it was wonderful. It is wonderful.
Oh, you did? Oh, thank you so much. Yeah.
No, it is. It really helps, I think, get a grasp on the issue. So what you can see here is you've got a 2x2, right? You've got health at the side and you've got performance across the bottom. So worse health at the bottom, better health at the top, or at least health promoting at the top. Lower performance versus, higher performance from left to right. So you can see different types of presenteeism here. The ideal situation, top right, functional presenteeism. So, I mean, of course, the ideal situation is we've got no ill health whatsoever, right? We're off the grid entirely, but expecting that we do have some ill health going on, what we want is functional presenteeism. So this is a case where I'd argue we've made adaptations to the work. It's not impeding health. In fact, hopefully it's helping to contribute to recovery or good health. So it's meaningful work, and also performance isn't affected. So somebody can get on with their job and be, almost entirely 100% productive, perhaps. So functional presenteeism. So we've got some. Yeah, go ahead.
So just functional presenteeism. Then let's kind of paint a scenario. So I wake up one morning and I'm feeling, kind of a sore throat. I'm feeling a light headache, but nothing really that impedes me from actually just, conducting my job. It doesn't require me for actually to be, for me to lie on bed and do nothing, right? So I feel that there's something like not right, but I can still function, right?
Okay. That falls into that category, yeah. So it could be a mild health issue that falls into that category, yeah.
Okay, fantastic.
I would argue, I don't know about Maria and Caroline, but I would argue that it doesn't only have to be mild issues, though. If well managed, it could be a fairly chronic and possibly severe health issue, but it's well managed, and therefore we can also still, perform well in our roles.
So what can you give me an example of a chronic condition that's well managed that could actually fit into functional presenteeism?
Oh gosh, let's think. I wonder about, there's lots of people going through cancer treatments at work. It certainly might require some adaptations, but it doesn't mean that their productivity is, entirely depleted. It might be other health conditions, most of the people perhaps, where a simple-ish modification to the work means that whereas I can't work in that particular position, but actually I'm completely fine in this type of position, maybe it's a sit-stand desk or something quite simple like that. So I believe that there are probably more severe health issues that can be adaptations can be made to equally make those also productive.
Okay, so from mild conditions to severe conditions that are well managed, that falls under functional presenteeism. Okay.
Yeah.
All clear now.
So shall we go top left next?
Yes.
So therapeutic presenteeism. So this in Maria and Caroline's model is where performance is reduced, let's say, or affected. However, it is in a support of health. So perhaps this is a phased return to work where you've returned on reduced duties. So yes, we accept that performance is going to be reduced. However, it's with the explicit aim of improving health, of helping that person to recover. So I think the key thing for me anyway with this category is that it's often an important part of return to work or managing health at work, but it shouldn't be permanent necessarily. So perhaps it might be a place where somebody needs to stay for a while until their health improves, just to mean it's a condition that will improve, and then they can hopefully be moved into functional presenteeism later. So I think it's one of the downsides that you see to poorly managed work-related health or health at work, where the management isn't on top of it. So let's say somebody's been given some, reduced duties or scope of responsibility or even hours, but it just drags on a little bit too long, and actually that person then starts to get a little bit bored even. And so that could be managed a bit tighter, and they could be allowed to return to full duties a bit sooner. It needs to be monitored closely, I suppose, is what I'm saying.
Now, I'll go back to the slide in a second, Zara. So therapeutic presenteeism, does that include, for instance, the situation in which I've been unwell, for a while, but because I enjoy the work that I do, and because I find a sense of purpose, and as in the work that I do, the work that I do has meaning. I feel a sense of belonging with my colleagues, and I do want to actually invest time in work, even though I'm unwell, right? Because actually doing the work is therapeutic, and it's actually, it's a bit of a, the person might see it as part of a healing process as well. Will that be included in therapeutic presenteeism then?
It could be that. If the productivity is reduced for the time being, but yet they're experiencing the work as therapeutic, so it's contributing to their health. But also what you mentioned there may be overachieving presenteeism. So for somebody who just loves their work, they're a workaholic. And so if they're experiencing, a health issue, which arguably they should be reining back a little bit, what they're doing and how many hours they're putting in and all of that, but they're not, their health will be affected detrimentally. But they love their job, or they really want that next promotion, so they are, so I think purpose and work motivation can tip two ways. So the bottom right, overachieving presenteeism, is right, tipping over, tipping too far, and potentially at the detriment of that person's health. So it's that person who you say, do you know what? Your motivation and commitment to the job is phenomenal, and that's brilliant. But I can see that, or you're telling me that you're feeling this, that, and the other, whatever the symptoms are, or I can see that, or whatever colleagues have told me, and I think actually you need to take a bit of a step back, or maybe have some time off. Stress is the obvious one. Burnout, at least burnout would be in that category. So it's where they are still delivering at 100% performance, but it's at the detriment of their health. So their health will be affected in this quadrant.
All right. So, because the case that that I had in mind when I asked you this question is the case of a person that I know that she's going through serious cancer treatment, but she's being very careful about allocating a specific number of hours. I mean,
Yes.
she understands how many hours she can put in the morning, how many hours she can do in the afternoon. She understands that she cannot actually go physically and meet with someone.
Yeah.
But her connection to to her business
Helping.
gives her that energy.
Yeah, that's
helping.
therapeutic.
Yeah.
I would say that definitely sounds like therapeutic presenteeism. It's having a positive impact on her health. Yes, as you say, she's being careful about the number of hours that she does, and how she does and when. So there's a modifications to her performance and hours put in, productivity. So yeah, therapeutic, but the work is having hopefully a positive impact.
Yeah, and I totally understand your point about making sure that the therapeutic presenteeism doesn't really turn into overachieving presenteeism, and that should be managed obviously at the individual level, but the managers should step in as well and should actually notice whether that transition is being made.
Exactly.
Right? And if they're overstepping, then into that category, then the manager should be very upfront and very clear. And now, but what are there any kind of ethical, moral, or perhaps even legal implications of a manager trying to kind of contain this person's desire to fall into overachieving presenteeism, and the individual having the right?
I think that's a really good question. I mean, I'm not a legal expert. I mean, I think between the two of us, we know enough about the legal side of managing health at work. There's something else with influential at the same time, which is the push-pull theory of motivation as presenteeism. So it's relevant here. But yeah, as you said, it's the key thing for the manager is to be noticing. To be noticing what's going on for that individual is to know, should they be looking after their health a little bit more, and perhaps reducing their productivity temporarily for now, just to look after their health. I mean, what we know in terms of the legal side, every employer has a duty, right? As you've alluded to, a duty of care to make sure that we're not detrimentally affecting people's health. So I think we have a duty to flag it to them, to say, I'm concerned, or I've noticed that, or, all of those sorts of things. I wonder, what do you think? Where is the legal stance in terms of if the individual said, no, but I really want to, I do not want to take a day off, I do not want to reduce my hours or, types of things I'm working on. I don't know, where would that sit?
I think it always comes down to, or for the most part, comes down to the reasonable adjustment concept, right? And so as a manager, am I making reasonable adjustments to not put this particular person at a disadvantage, right? And if the manager, documents, the exchange of, the communication interchange between, the employee and the manager, and if the manager can clearly show that they've been trying to look
Yes.
after the welfare, and well-being of the employee by reducing workload, reducing workdays, because obviously the situation merits it,
Yeah.
and then that's fine.
Yeah.
I think it's the other way around, is when the employee basically communicates that he or she cannot actually perform at that level when it comes to workload, work pace, and the manager doesn't make reasonable adjustments, and they still demand for that workload and that work pace to actually be met. I mean, that's the bit in which people will get into trouble.
Absolutely.
Right? And unfortunately, we see more of the situation in which the manager kind of like ignores the health issue,
because it's at their benefit, right? Especially in a burnout scenario, it's for the benefit of the organization. So it's quite easy to just allow that person to keep putting in all of those hours, despite the fact that perhaps deep down, this may be leading to bad things in terms of their health and burnout and etc. So I think you're right. It's reasonable adjustments, and have you made a reasonable effort to flag these concerns to them? And I'm sure if there are listeners in occupational health, they may well chip in with examples of this, because it's ringing bells from my days in occupational health, working with OH professionals, where they have had to have serious conversations with people who they are fearful of being at risk of burnout or, coronary issues, perhaps because of the pressure that they're putting themselves under. So you would have to evidence, I think, that you've tried to have a serious talk with them and really encourage them to take a step back a little bit. It links also, though, to the push-pull theory that I mentioned in terms of presenteeism. So culture is another factor, and we have a responsibility to make sure that the culture, which of course is more implicit, less overt, isn't having a detrimental impact. So push-pull is about, why do people do this? Why do people come to work when they're unwell? So the argument is that it could be a push in terms of you feel that you have to, which could be, for instance, because of punitive serious absence management, consequences, or I won't get that promotion because, it will be looked badly upon. Or I know that, for instance, in my research, people talk about the return to work interview as something they would dread to do. And so I'm not going to take it off because I don't want to have to do that god-awful return to work interview. It would be more, I do it because I don't want to let my colleagues down. I do it because I really enjoy my job. I do it because I get purpose out of my job, and I don't want to be sat at home thinking more about, how well I feel. So I think that's key as well, trying to create a culture where the influence on people is a positive one. It's more like a carrot rather than a stick, that they want to come to work.
Yeah, totally agree with you. And just going back to the point of, the manager-employee relationship as well, even though the manager might be noticing that there's something not quite right with the employee, it's still the employee's responsibility to report, how he or she is feeling, because that's where it all starts, right? I don't think that, a claim can be made against a manager who, didn't notice, because the employee has to actually report it, and in writing. This is how I'm feeling. And unfortunately, the rate of burnout in the world is actually increasing. Now, I think that we are in the 44% of employees have actually felt burned down in the past couple of years. That's on 1 in 2, right? And and do you know which is the most influential factor in employees' burnout in the world?
Tell me.
It's the relationship and work dynamic with their manager. So, and that's like 74%, right?
Wow.
So if the manager actually pays attention to the work dynamic and the relationship with the employee, we can immediately lower the rate of burnout in the world. It can be solved at that level, in that level. Anyway, I want to go back to the model because we have to cover dysfunctional presenteeism. So let me just share my screen once again, and here it is.
Yeah, so dysfunctional presenteeism is that bottom left. So this is where health is poor and performance is poor. So not a good situation to be in. I think this is where presenteeism gets its bad rep, because often it goes unnoticed and unmanaged, and therefore this is likely to be a situation that you're facing. So somebody is unwell, it's not being managed, and their performance isn't affected, and we haven't made any adjustments, so it's just a bit of a mess. So that is the situation where we absolutely don't want that type of presenteeism. We need to move them. Depending on the health condition, if it's a serious health condition, then we try and move them up into therapeutic presenteeism, perhaps. Yes, except that their, duties or the scale or hours, needs to be reduced for a while. But let's at least not be aggravating their health. So let's try and move them out of dysfunctional presenteeism. Not a good place to be.
Yeah. I keep on looking at this quadrant, and I'm so in love with it, because it really gives us, if I were to be, a manager in XYZ business, this model allows me to, place my people. If they're experiencing some kind of health issue, into one of these 4 quadrants, right? And then it would force me to actually start making this, the choices of, okay, I see that Jennifer, for instance, is in the dysfunctional presenteeism. How can I bring her to therapeutic presenteeism? What are the reasonable adjustments that I can make in order to bring him from dysfunctional to therapeutic presenteeism, right? And again, if I'm seeing that Jeff is in the overachieving presenteeism category, how can I, slow him down? And I understand his impetus, and I understand his drive, and I understand his desire, or whatever. But how can I bring him again into the whole therapeutic presenteeism that will eventually then move into functional, and then that will eventually move out of presenteeism?
Out of this entirely, completely.
Right.
And I think the challenge with presenteeism is that managers have a good view on the bottom axis, performance, what the job entails. Health professionals have a good view on the health axis, but neither has both sets of information. And I think that's the key to trying to manage, work health in the workplace. Is you've got to have both bits of information. So managers need to try and get, if it's a slightly complex health issue, even get some advice from a GP if you don't have occupational health people, to access, or occupational health, even better, because they have an understanding of the workplace as well. And, it's a hard job for occupational health professionals who don't really see what that person needs to do for that job. So it's very hard for them to try and advise on the work adaptations. So it's a real challenge, but as a manager, I'd just say try and get information that you need to be able to make judgments on what that person can do, because we're not health professionals. As managers and leaders typically aren't health professionals, and therefore you need that information, because it's the second part of the puzzle.
Yeah, and it's like, and by the way, does this quadrant actually have a title?
It's the Health Performance Framework.
It's a health performance framework. That's what it's called. Okay, all right. And these frameworks are so useful. I remember I was in a hospital once, and I noticed a kid was brought in with a broken arm, I think, or something happened to him. And the nurse basically just came to him, and she showed him just a scale from 0 to 10. 0, it was a face with, that was really hurting, and 10 was, no, sorry, the 10 was that face with that was really in pain, and the 0. And she just said, "Where are you?" And he just pointed to 6. And then she made a decision about, what medicines and what to prescribe, and kind of based on this little boy's response, right?
Yes, I know the scale. I've been in the hospital with a child. Yeah, I know the scale you're talking about. And it makes sense, doesn't it? Because how hard is it to try and get you to describe pain otherwise?
But it's such a simple and beautiful model. It's like, for instance, at Dharma, my consultancy, we run a workshop called Dealing Effectively with Change, right? And basically what we show is during the workshop, a 7-stage kind of model, in which stage 1 is feeling numb. So for instance, when you're told that your division will be sold to another business, right? And then now you're going to be reporting it to someone else. You're going to have to move house, and the future is very uncertain. So stage 1 is feeling numb. Stage 2 is feeling angry and upset. Stage 4 is about slowly integrating the changes into your workday. Stage 5 is experimenting until you get to stage 7, which is basically you're fully integrated into the change, right? So you can go, you go from being numb to fully integrating, the change, right? And during the workshop, we ask a very simple question, where are you? Are you feeling numb? Are you feeling upset? Are you feeling depressed? Are you, experimenting? Are you integrating? And then once you know that piece of information, I mean, as a manager, then, okay, you've got 7 people in your team, and now you know where they're at, psychologically in this process. What are you going to do to move them, not from numb to integration in 48 hours, because that's never going to happen, but how do you move them from being numb into perhaps, stage 3 or 4, which is about kind of experimenting with a new reality, right? And then they have to commit to doing some action. But without the data, I mean, because you're going to take a blanket approach, for all of them. You have to take an individual approach, and then you as a manager have to decide where are you as well in that scale. So again, that's why I love your framework, it's Mary's and Caroline's, you said?
Maria and Caroline, Maria found it to Murray at Leicester University now, and Caroline at Laval in Quebec, I think she is.
Where's Maria from?
Fantastic. Pardon? Maria's now at Leicester University. She's now at Leicester. Pardon?
Where's she from?
Oh, originally she's Greek.
Greek. And Caroline?
No, Canadian.
And Canadian, Greek and Canadian. So perfect combination for the health and performance matrix.
Yeah, but it gives you a map, doesn't it? As I was listening to you talking, giving that examples, it struck me. It's like we dump a load of managers in a forest and we tell them manage your way out with no map, right? But
exactly.
Give me a map. Okay, now I can maybe get out of this forest, because it's a hard job, right? Being a manager, you need to manage the task, that manage the person, and all of their, complexities that people bring. It's a tough job. Let's give them some tools.
Yeah, and that's why we're here. That's why we have a podcast like this. Because we want to give business leaders tools and strategies and techniques and frameworks that will help them make better decisions so that they can become better managers, so that they can improve engagement, retention, and performance. That's at the end of the day the whole mission of this podcast, which you are greatly contributing to, my dear Zara. I'm so happy about that. So Zara, let's talk about how people decide, right? And I think in your workshop you mentioned 4 elements, which is the trigger, options, evaluations, and feedback. Did I get that right?
Yeah. Well, I remember.
Yeah. I was really impressed, I have to say. Yeah. And anyway, so can you just explain to us, what are these 4 kind of stages?
Yeah. So obviously, any presenteeism decision starts with the trigger, i.e. you feel unwell, you feel some form of ill health. So it starts as thinking, don't feel great. What shall I do today in terms of work? So that's instant, and often the decision is quite instantaneous. We'll probably come back to that. And our research shows that it looks like the decision-making process is quite difficult for chronic as opposed to acute health conditions. And you see a much more elaborate decision-making process for people with chronic health conditions. And I think that's simply because they're faced with this most days or regularly. They're used to it, the ins and outs, and also it's a real dilemma for them because you see lots of discussion or weighing up of, well, I'd love to take a sick day, but I already did that last month. And, I feel like I've only got so much favor with my employer because I have a chronic health condition. Anyhow, so options and evaluation, we're seeing increasingly is quite iterative. So other decision-making research, psychology and general parliament stuff, shows us that we're not really rational decision-making, because often most of the decisions we get quite irrational, rapid. We have to get on with our working days and we haven't really got the time or energy to deliberate. So what we don't do is kind of come up with all of the possible options, weigh them all out, and rationally weigh up pros and cons of each, and then make a really rational decision. As we might, let's say we're making a strategy decision around a board table, we might do it that way. We don't do it that way. It's called presenteeism. But there is this weighing up of what I could do, what are my options versus what I should do. And what comes in here is motive. So it's a motive driven process. So what I mean by that is, for instance, when you ask people to articulate this decision-making process, they might say, well, I mean, I am allowed to take sick days. I do get paid sick leave. However, I want to get a promotion, and I know that the process is going ahead next month, so I don't want to. That's good, but should. But you still the fact that I want that promotion. So it's as I say, very much motive-driven, value-laden decision, not an objective, rational, logical decision. The overarching thing from our research was that you would be surprised how often people's decisions are more strongly weighted by work-related motives rather than health-related motives. So very rarely was the person's own health concerns at the front of their decision-making process. It was more, okay, well, which bits of my work can I do? Can I do that? Well, yes, I can do that. Therefore, I'll carry on working. And the majority of the decisions came out as presenteeism. More often than not, people carry on working. And I wonder whether there's a bit of status quo bias in that. We're already working, therefore it's a bigger effort, a bigger decision, and lots more implications for me to actually have to formally declare myself or request sick leave. And therefore I'll carry on working if I can. And that pretty much is the way it goes. So anyway, we evaluate the option that comes to us first, and if that is good enough in terms of our motives, we'll do that. So that typically is the way. And then you mentioned the final stage, which is a feedback loop. So when we were hypothesizing in terms of and looking at decision-making theory, critical to all decision-making is a feedback loop, right? It's how we make effective decisions. However, when you look at these types of decisions in practice, people rarely reflect on, was it the right decision? So, for instance, let's say I experienced this health condition last week and I carry on working. How did it fare? Did it do me any good? I think perhaps we reflect more on sickness absence decisions, actually, in terms of how did my boss react when I got back to the workplace, and do my colleagues look disgruntled, and all of that sort of stuff. But for presenteeism, we often don't, which means that you're unlikely to change the decision in future because you're not really learning. Did that decision were the consequences good for me, for my health? We rarely reflect on that. So what are the implications of that? For me, it highlighted how if the best thing for the person's health were to take sickness absence, which I'm not saying is all of the time, but on occasion it might be, then there needs to be some form of intervention from somebody to jolt me out of this sort of bias towards, well, I'll just carry on if I can. So it's that question that you mentioned earlier, the manager checking in to say, you're okay, and how are you doing? How are you getting on? How are you feeling? Should we change what we're doing here? Do we need to modify your tasks, or do you actually need to take some time off? And also to help people reflect on the decisions that they made. How did that go for you? Did it have the results that you were hoping it to, whether that's in terms of your own health? Did you get that promotion? And okay, if you did get that promotion, health-wise, are you okay? So to reflect holistically on that decision. But the very intuitive, quick decisions, which means that I would argue they're not always the right ones. They're a little bit of intervention from others outside of that situation might help us make more effective decisions.
Yeah, and as I was listening to you, Sarah, it's like, and I'm sorry for bragging about my team, but I just have to share. I mean, it's sometimes when they're going through a period of ill health, whether minor or a bit more significant, they all have this, or actually the majority of them have this approach. They send me a message saying, this is all the work that needs to be done. Okay, this is what I think I can do. This is what I think that I can do. Can you check my decision? So it's not, they don't put the, so they're not actually putting the decision, the final decision they put on me, but they do like 80% of the work, and I might just say, this bullet, okay, or this bullet, you switch it here. Are you okay with that? But they come forward with a proposal,
Suggestion, yeah.
And because they know that again, it takes a while to build a culture of psychological safety, but when you build it, that's exactly what happens. People feel the liberty of coming to you saying, I am, I'm not functioning at the best of my ability,
Yes.
because I'm going through this right now, and this is what I can do, this is what I cannot do, and are you okay with that?
Yes.
And it's really encouraging and it's really inspiring, to actually experience that, as
Yes.
opposed to having to fish it out, or as opposed to, just, having to deal with a situation after it kind of explodes.
Yeah,
Right?
absolutely. Because you can't manage what you don't know, right? And if
Exactly.
somebody doesn't want to tell us, what they're experiencing health-wise, then we can't and shouldn't try to force them. But the occasions of that is that, well, I can only manage what I see. And I've only got half of the picture. So that's, I think, hard on this situation is that if an individual, if the trust isn't there for that individual to share what's going on for them, then that's a really tough situation to try and manage.
Exactly. And so, Sarah, as we are closing the episode, I want to ask you very practical questions, okay? Obviously, there's going to be a lot of employees listening to us, and business leaders listening to us, and employers in general listening to us. So when it comes to presenteeism, what is your practical, very clear and direct message to employees? If you are feeling, that you're not, fully fit to work, however minor or major the situation, what's your message to them?
So the first thing that they need to do is to think about, what can I do at work that won't detrimentally affect my health? Now, if they need some advice from a medical professional, obviously go and get that, seek it out. Despite the fact that we all know how hard it is to get into your GP these days. But also just then think about crafting, job crafting. I think academics, we often call it, don't we? But how could you shape your job? Try and take some control, and as you've said, craft. What could I do today that I feel capable and I don't feel would make my health worse? What can I do? But of course, then, as in your example, involve your manager within that decision. Obviously, that's caveated by assuming that the individual is in a culture where that trust exists. If it doesn't, that's a different scenario. I think my suggestion would be leave and go and find an organisation that has. If you're a leader and you've got a responsibility to create that, it's hard if you're not a senior in the organisation and actually influence. So anyway, assuming that there is a degree of trust in the organisation, think about how you can craft your work. Think about the adaptations that can be made. Involve your manager and any health professionals in that decision making. Yeah, and if it means that it's a temporary reduction in the amount that you do, that's okay. If that's going to help you get back to being 100% in the future, then that's part of the journey, and just sit as steps.
Yeah. I'm going to share with you something that I came across a while back, and I keep on seeing studies that basically support the findings of those initial studies that I came across a few years ago. Do you know what percentage of workers would get help if they only ask for it?
No.
Give me a number.
I don't know. Doesn't it depend on the organisation?
In general, I mean, this study has been conducted with businesses.
Would get help if they asked for it. Ooh, I would like to say the vast majority, like 80%.
Yeah, 74%. That's kind of and the number fluctuates between 74 and 79. If you ask for help, and it's interesting because when we run workshops, with, I have a workshop with Ernst & Young actually in a couple of hours. People from Asia Pac and Europe and America. And when we get to the section of, I ask them the same question, if you were to ask for help, what are the chances that you're going to get help? And the majority of people, again, across the entire globe, Sarah, they say, between 70 to 80%. Okay. So that's the first question that I ask. And then the follow-up question is, have you been in a situation in which you wanted to ask for help, but you didn't? And I just say yes or no in the chat. And 95% of webinar participants, again, employees from across the world, say yes. I wanted to ask for help and I didn't. And then the follow-up question is like, why didn't you ask for help? because I didn't want to be seen as incompetent, because I didn't want to be seen as weak, because I didn't want to be seen as a non-team player, and all of these limiting beliefs, right? Because and I say to them, listen, the person that you're asking for help from, they're human beings as well, and they get ill as well, and they've been perhaps in your same situation as well, and they completely understand about, so can you see the incongruence between, they know that they're gonna get help, but they don't ask for it,
Yeah.
because of these limiting beliefs that are associated with not asking for So I would just round up your message to the employees is ask for help, and most likely, statistically speaking, you will actually get it. And as you're saying, if you don't get it, just go somewhere else. It's like, see, there's this girl that I met a while back. Usually when we help businesses achieve international standards of workplace well-being, part of the requirement is that once we understand what workplace well-being interventions we need to put in place, we need to recruit champions from within the business to implement those workplace well-being initiatives. That's part of the requirements, both for national and international standards of workplace well-being. And there was this particular instance in which this lady came forward, and she wanted to be mental well-being champion for this particular business. And let's say that her name is Susan, okay? So I said, Susan, how long have you been in this business? So she said, 3 months. And we're like, you've been in this business for 3 months only, and you've come forward to be the mental well-being champion for this business that employs, hundreds of people, you don't know that many people, and you've come forward. And she said, yes. I said, why? Because in my previous company, I had a mental health issue. I asked for help. I didn't get it, and how did you feel about it? It floored me. Okay. And now that's why I decided to leave this company and join this business that I know, kind of provides this support. And because she had heard that we've been implementing this, helping this business achieve national standards of workplace well-being, and that's what attracted her to the business, right? And now I want to be an what do you call it, an active agent of change. And she said to me, I want to make sure that no one goes through what I went through in my previous business, so that's why I'm coming forward. Right?
Amazing.
I love that. Anyway, okay. So
which
that's the
does
message.
highlight another thing that employees can do, which is talk about their own experiences to colleagues, because if they've had a good experience, then they should share that so that other people know, oh, okay, well, you raised that issue and you're still here, you didn't get fired, and nobody thought worse of you as a result. So share those experiences. So it's another thing they can do.
Yeah. Great advice. I love that. Share the experience as well. Yes, because victimization is a big thing as well in business. That's another psychosocial hazard. When you try to raise an issue and then you get punished for raising the issue.
Yeah.
Goodness me. Anyway,
and increasingly people feel like they're on their own. If they're working increasingly remotely, you feel like no one else has ever had this experience. Well, they probably, they might have.
Totally.
So talk to people.
Totally. Now, what's your message to management?
Managers, so check in with people. Don't wait for them to raise the issue with you. Check in periodically, as we said earlier, with people. Because some managers, when I've talked about presenteeism, have said to me, well, surely it's better that sickness absence, right? Because they're in the workplace, so not a problem, kind of implication. And you think, well, yes, possibly better that somebody is at work than off sick. However, if it's not unmanaged, potentially you've got somebody operating at 50% for 100 days, rather than if they needed it one day off sick. So it highlights how unmanaged presenteeism, if just left to go on, can be quite costly. So be proactive, check in on people. How are you? How are you doing? And create a culture where people feel comfortable to share health issues and experiences. It happens for all of us to say, I don't know, it's fact of life. We need to manage it just as we manage anything else that crops up in the business. So have those conversations. Think about what you're role modeling. Think about if you're being the hero who's struggling despite these terrible things that they're experiencing, what's that signaling to everybody else? It's telling them that they should do the same. So think about that. but also just to train to be a work environment where people want to come for the right reasons, not that they feel that they have to struggle in, and hopefully then work is a positive influence on them, and not something that they, it's a carrot, not a stick, is what we all try and encourage, isn't it?
Yeah, I totally agree. And finally, Sarah, we've got a message for the employee, a message for the manager, and now a message for the employer, right? So let me start with the message for the employer. Comply with your legal duty of care. That's like, I mean, 90% of businesses, are not complying with, the minimum requirements, when it comes to their legal duty of care, particularly not having a mental health and safety management system in place that can pick up on these things.
Yeah,
Okay. And
absolutely.
that's number one. Number two, create, it should be part of the company's ethos, to create a culture of psychological safety in the business, because managers, although if I'm a manager and I want to create such a culture, I need to make sure that my company as a whole is aligned, with this principle and with this initiative, because otherwise I'm going to run into a wall. Because if I'm working in a kind of a toxic environment, and if I'm working in an environment in which there's a lot of mistrust, there's a blame culture, nothing's really being done, and I'm the only one kind of trying to create a cultural psychological situation within my team, then when they have to interact with other members of other teams, then they're going to run into a bit of a situation, right? And they might get hurt in the process for being vulnerable, for admitting to mistakes, for surfacing problems in real time, which is at the heart of psychological safety. So employers should actually take this company-wide initiative of, again, comply with their legal duty of care or achieve national or international standards of workplace well-being, which will force them, among other things, to create a culture of psychological safety. So what would you add to the message to employers in general?
Yeah, that's that. So as you said, not asking is not an excuse. You have to find out what's going on in your own company. You have a legal responsibility to do that, to investigate what impact is the work we're actually able to do having on their health, and vice versa. I would say take it as a system. To make this system supported, you have the view of the entire organization and control over all of the policies and procedures that you have. Then you need to look at the impact that things are having on you. So, for instance, you can't sell on one hand or create a culture of psychological safety, and then have a very punitive approach to making mistakes on the other. Or, think about how you're rewarding people. What types of behaviors is that encouraging? If you have a very stringent trigger policy or a system in place that's essential, or what behaviors are actually creating. Yes, it's tricky to manage acting as absence, but just think about the policies that you have in place and the intended and unintended consequences that they are having, and train your managers. If we have good managers, many of these problems will be resolved. I'm not saying ill health will go away. Of course, that's a fact of life, but work shouldn't exacerbate it, and nor should somebody be pushed out of the workplace because of their health. So good management should mean that we are creating jobs that have some meaning and purpose, and people are capable, they're equipped to do their jobs well, they have control, all of those things, the psychosocial factors that you mentioned earlier.
Oh, Zara, this conversation, and this is a compliment, by the way, completely met my expectations, because my expectations were like completely astronomical, and I knew for sure that our this episode was going to completely meet those astronomical expectations. So I cannot begin to thank you enough, for sharing your wisdom, your expertise, your knowledge. I mean, you have such a strong academic and industry background. I mean, and that combination is super powerful, because I've met people that just are, in academia, or people that are just in industry, and it's not kind of the same. You got to have a bit of both. You have one leg on one place and one leg on the other, and then, and that's why I was immediately, struck by, not only by what you presented, but how you presented it as well. Okay.
Well,
now,
thank you. Every week should begin with such compliments. So thanks. Good way to start on my week.
All right.
But thanks for having me on. It's been a pleasure.
Fantastic. But hey, just one more thing. I'm going to ask you a couple of questions. I'm going to put you on the spot. Okay. So I might have to apologize for that later on, but
Okay.
I will. So these are two questions that we ask of all of our guests. Okay. So first question is, can you think of one or two heroes, past or present, that have had a massive influence in your life?
Gosh. Have you got another question? Have you pondering on it? Oh, heroes.
Just think of, I mean, sometimes the word heroes implies someone that has had a magnificent,
Yeah.
influence in the world, but I'm just talking about Zara's world. I'm not talking
I
about.
mean, I don't know if everybody feels this way, but you immediately go to your parents, don't you? So my parents, they're so different and so complementary. The impact that they've had on me has been amazing. So how would I describe the type of influence? They gave me a lot of leeway. So I try to do the same for my kids. So which meant that they gave me a lot of trust and responsibility, and I think allowed me to learn through consequences, rather than curtailing my scope of influence or responsibility because they didn't trust me. It was supposed to give trust. It's probably where my approach to management and parenting comes from now. Give trust, only take it away if people prove to you that it can't be trusted. Give trust, give responsibility, and empower people to step into it. What other than them? What else? Heroes. When I come back for part 2, I'll have a think about that question.
All right. A good answer, by the way. And second question is, complete the following sentence. Okay. The world would be a better place if.
Oh, there's so many things that I knew we could write a book on that, couldn't we? One of the first that comes to my mind is if we sought to understand where people are coming from before we react or judge. Because often in the workplace and possibly in politics, I don't exist in that a lot of it. I think big issues come from small misunderstandings. We're coming from different perspectives. So seek to try and understand that perspective and then go from is how I would approach things. That's the psychologist Jamie coming out. Seek to understand how it's one of my children. If somebody behaves in a way that you don't agree with, there's always a reason for it. Try and find out where they're coming from. What's the reason for it? So yeah. It might not be a rational reason, but there's a reason.
Wonderful answer, Sarah. Wonderful. So again, I cannot emphasize enough how uplifted I feel, with having had this conversation, and I'm pretty sure that a lot of people will actually get benefit, from this exchange, and hopefully they'll be using Maria's and Caroline's model, to actually have meaningful conversations. And that's why one of the many reasons why I wanted to have you on this episode as well. So, Zara, thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for your wisdom, experience, and knowledge. And as you've correctly said, we'll see you in part 2.
Did you like the fact that I invited myself in for part 2? So thank you very much and hope to see you soon.
Same here.